Hello and welcome to Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's chief football correspondent, Alex Crook, and the former Arsenal winger and title winner, Perry Groves. Here's what's coming up on a thrilling show after a thrilling weekend. The fact that they've put that performance together, they've galvanised the group. I think this could be a defining moment in their season.
Man City, at the minute, have just lost that little bit of air of invincibility. And it's great for, let's be honest, it's brilliant for the Premier League because you want Man City to be a little bit vulnerable.
And I think it could get worse for Tottenham before it gets better. It hasn't taken long for Spurs to be a bit Spursy.
The refereeing standard this season, obviously before this international break, I think has got worse because of the way that they've been managed by Howard Webb. I think there's too much fear.
I do think, because they're Manchester United, Erik ten Hag is probably the most scrutinised manager in the Premier League. Maybe it's time to cut Erik ten Hag a little bit of slack.
Wow, we can hardly believe what we've witnessed this weekend. I had the good fortune in the last 7 days to be at Chelsea beating Tottenham 4-1, Wolves beating Tottenham in the last minute in the game at Molineux on Saturday, and Chelsea 4. Manchester City 4, I forgot where I was there for a second. We've just got back from it. It's absolutely blown us away. It was an amazing game, an amazing atmosphere, and a pivotal moment. You went to West Ham, that was crazy as well. I mean, have you can you remember a weekend where there would be, or a week where there's been so many bonkers games?
No, you said there, it started off on Monday, didn't it, with, for a change, watching it on the telly, VAR actually made it a bit more entertaining. Because like goals disallowed, offside, with toe offside, whatever. And then, so you was at Stamford Bridge today, and obviously I've seen the highlights and watched the first half, and it was just, I think it was a weekend before the international break where nearly every team has gone to try and win the game.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Rather than just sitting back and being passive, and all credit to Chelsea today as well, because I thought they looked a lot more composed today. After beating Spurs on Monday, I think they looked a little bit more assured.
We'll talk about them in just a second. You were at Arsenal on Saturday, and it's really tight at the top now, isn't it? With the top 4 teams all separated by 2 points.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was pretty straightforward for Arsenal, it has to be said. So I think it's been a good weekend for the title race, because obviously if City have won, and they were very close to doing so, they go into this international break 3 points clear. They'd already amassed more points 11 games into a season than they'd managed since way back in 2018-19. So it feels like we have a genuine title race. And I put that to Manuel Akanji after the game, and he said that's what we want. You know, we want competition. I think they've got it.
Yeah, they've got a good points total, haven't they? But everybody else has got a good points total as well. Liverpool doing very well. They won again this weekend at home. Mo Salah scored his 200th goal in English football. A bit of controversy up there about a possible sending off. We've seen the replay of the ball, whether it went in or out for his headed goal. It certainly was in, wasn't it? So no problems there. So well done to them. And well done to Sheffield United, who got themselves off the bottom of the table with a point away at Brighton. But we start at Stamford Bridge, where it was bonkers. Bonkers, but brilliant. What a goal-packed game it was. Cole Palmer coming back to haunt his former club. Now, that moment could be key over the course of the season, couldn't it? Because you need ice in your veins to take that sort of penalty.
Yeah, and I think the biggest compliment you can pay is that nobody expected him to miss, because he's taken some ice-cold penalties under pressure already. He's wrestled the ball away from Raheem Sterling. He clearly is Chelsea's penalty taker, but his head must have been all over the place. Wivenshaw, born and bred, came through Man City's academy, sold by Manchester City. Such a key moment in the game, because if he misses, we know that Chelsea are going to lose. And it was a brilliant penalty, and I thought his performance was brilliant. We've got players likely to be withdrawn from the England squad due to injuries. I think he's a really good shout to fill one of those spots. I think he's excellent.
Yeah, mentioned that to you just before he was about to take the penalty, that it could be that he ends up getting a phone call by the end of the night. What a great day that would be. As a player, I mean, obviously you never were in that situation where you took a penalty against Arsenal. Can you imagine what it must feel like, though, in those circumstances? You're playing against your former club, you've got the chance to equalise in a big game in stoppage time, taking a penalty. You must be able to sort of feel some of that emotion, right?
Yeah, your legs will go a little bit stiffer, and he had, was it 2 minutes 39 seconds, didn't he, before he could take it?
Yes.
And I just think, I love the way he plays. I love players that have got arrogance, and I think he has arrogance in a good way on the pitch. And he would have been all this week looking forward to this game, actually thinking, like, quietly, I've got something to prove to you, because you weren't going to play me regularly. That's why I left. And I mean, you've got to thank Pep Guardiola for letting Cole Palmer go one of his rivals, because he said he does what's good for the player. Never heard so much rubbish in all my life, by the way. Because he didn't, let's be honest, he didn't see Chelsea as a rival at this particular time, which is fair enough.
Well, that's not what he said after the game, see. So I was in the press conference after the game and he was sitting there and he was saying, well, what do you expect? This is Chelsea. They're doing what we've done. You used to have a go at us for spending. The inference was that you used to have a go at us for spending money. They've spent £1 billion. What are you expecting? I think the biggest achievement is the fact that we haven't lost to them for so long. That's the story. You know, he did this the other week when they played Arsenal. When he told you what the headline was. It wasn't the fact that Arsenal had beaten them. It was the fact that it's taken so long for them to beat them. But you know, he was asked this question. Do you think that this season, whereas before, if you get behind against Manchester City, you sort of almost give up, are teams seeing a vulnerability in his squad that they believe that even if they have conceded against them, they can still get back at them?
Well, I mentioned the stat was 69 times they've taken the lead now and they've only lost one. That includes today.
Yeah. To
be fair to Chelsea, they were behind 3 times. So I think that Man City at the minute have just lost that little bit of air of invincibility. You know, if you went behind, you thought, oh, how many is it going to be? And I don't care what he says, you win the treble, it's very, very difficult to keep yourself that focused and be that hungry. And I think he's pleased that they're top of the league, but they're still in and around Arsenal and Liverpool. I think he might have thought it might take them a little bit of a while, like they did last season, to get into their stride. So you've been beaten by Wolves, been beaten by Arsenal, so drawn today. So they're missing, I don't care what anybody says, they're missing Kevin De Bruyne. They're missing that little bit of creativity. Gundogan obviously left, they're missing that as well. John Stones going into midfield from the centre half, which the other centre halves can't seem to be able to do. And it's great for, let's be honest, it's brilliant for the Premier League because you want Man City to be a little bit vulnerable. Yeah. And with Arsenal and Liverpool within touching distance.
It was good to see Chelsea take them on as well and, you know, go at them rather than just be submissive, sit behind the ball and look to break on the counter. They created themselves, they played some good football through the thirds, took the ball up the pitch slickly and created a lot of opportunities in the game. And actually, they probably would have created more if they'd made better choices on the edge of the penalty area. What did you make of the penalty for Haaland, where he's throwing his arms around like an octopus with Cucurella, and yet somehow it's Cucurella who gets penalised for that? I mean, I thought it was 50-50, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, play on.
I thought it was clever from Haaland because I think he initiates the initial contact, but not enough for it to be a foul. And then he gets the wrong side of Cucurella, and Cucurella almost has to react by tugging him down. He's gone down easily. He's a huge guy. I think it was a penalty.
He's 6'5". Cucurella's 4'8", is he? Right. And
that's with the hair.
With the hair, exactly. But he's clever because if you look, they've both got hold of each other's shirts. But then the first foul is from Haaland on Cucurella because he actually, as he drags his shirt, that means that he's slightly off balance. So then Haaland can get in front of him, and then he goes over. So the first foul is on Cucurella, and Anthony Taylor. I know you can sort of see in real time, okay-ish, but then it goes to VAR, and they'll say it's not clear and obvious. But it's a foul from Haaland first.
But it's naive from Cucurella to allow himself to fall into that trap because if you watch it back, the ball's not going to reach Haaland. It's headed away by Thiago Silva, so he's not actually a threat at that point.
Yeah, but he draws you into those sort of things.
Well, he's a threat because he's hurling Haaland in the 6-yard box and you panic.
Absolutely.
That's what it is.
At the other end, Thiago Silva scored a terrific goal, then lost his marker for the Akanji goal, then ended up deflecting the ball into his own net for the goal, which at the time we thought would probably be the winner. Has anyone ever, as a 39-year-old, ever had such an impact on one big Premier League game?
It's a great question. and the answer is probably no. I mean, it was a terrific header, but it wasn't great defending for the other 2 goals. I'm not sure what he was trying to do when he diverted Rodri's shot in, but they still show character, Chelsea. They kept going.
Malagusto should have scored.
Malagusto should have scored. It was a penalty. I asked Pep Guardiola, any complaints? No, it was a penalty. And as we've mentioned, Cole Palmer tucked it away brilliantly. I think a draw was probably a fair result. And I think, in fairness to Chelsea, they've sort of played like that all season, probably bar the Forest home game. They've been in every game. They create chances. They play the Pochettino way. They just haven't shown the quality to take those chances so far.
I think it's worth saying about Chelsea, they've been building to this.
Yeah.
You've been seeing them get to this sort of stage. You could watch, if you follow their progress over the course of the season, slowly but surely you've seen these sort of performances coming together. I thought they actually reacted, and I think it was underrated, the way they behaved after they conceded the first goal at Spurs and even the second goal, which was ruled off, the way they reacted to that early setback at Spurs when it was 11 versus 11, I thought was pretty good. The way they reacted today was excellent after conceding the first goal. The fact that they've put that performance together, they've galvanised the group. I think this could be a defining moment in their season.
I think it's could be a prom night, could be a coming of age, couldn't it? Because, as I said, watching it and you was there live, they look more structured. I know it was mayhem, it was obviously end-to-end like basketball, but I actually thought in possession, they looked a lot smoother and they looked a lot more comfortable in possession. And you talk about Cole Palmer, he could have got one of the goals of the season as well, couldn't he? When he has his little individual run and then he sort of
close,
he just gets himself where he could maybe dink it. And he puts the ball for Reece James inside when I think it was it Guardiola fell over, didn't he?
Yeah.
And then Reece James has just put it across. So, yeah,
he's having a good impact.
It all depends how long they think the project's going to be. Because let's be honest, this season, I think Pochettino probably does have a free season where they're expecting him maybe to challenge getting in the Champions League positions. So I think he's probably got this so that it could just settle down a bit.
I also think that there's no way that they're changing because unless they're really stupid, there isn't anybody else of his profile that's going to come in and take that job with his experience and his ability. And having done the work that they've done already, they might as well let him see the project out for a little while at least. So yeah, free season, definitely. I think the most important thing is that today he sort of made a little bit more of a connection with the supporters. The players seem to have made a bit more of a connection with the supporters. It feels like a Chelsea team now. And it's great having these managers back in the league. Pep Guardiola obviously always comes out with a good line. Pochettino came out with one of the best lines straight after the game. What did he say live on radio?
He said, I asked the fourth official what the bleep, but he missed out the bleep.
Yeah.
Would you mind awfully
he
tell
stomped
me what's
onto the
going
pitch. He was giving it to Craig Pawson like that, and he stomped onto the pitch with a full-time whistle, and apparently went up to the referee and said, "What the?" And then, it went on from there.
You know you're struggling when Kyle Walker has to calm you down. He's come in and gone, right, calm yourself down.
It's brilliant. And then I was in the press conference with Pep afterwards, and we've done all of what we've done here, just asking him questions about what do you think this happened, and what do you think about that, and what do you think about Chelsea, and what do you think about how you reacted to this, and was it a penalty, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, almost exhausted because they'd been through the mill and they were tired. He just turned around and he said, "Did you enjoy yourself? Did you enjoy yourself?" And everyone went, "Yeah, yeah." And he went, "Right, okay, that's it then." And then, job done, I've finished. Do you know what I mean? It was it was brilliant.
We actually called him Pep.
Yes.
It's not easy like that with me, yeah, you and Pep.
I'm surprised actually we had a whole conversation. He didn't walk off until the very, very end. You were at West Ham United, 3-2 winners against Nottingham Forest. A good performance from West Ham. They could have been further ahead before Nottingham Forest pegged them back.
Yeah, to be fair, they had a brilliant 3v1 situation where Kudos should pass it better through to Paquetá, and it's a slow pass, he gets stuck under his feet. It was a brilliant game to watch because the first half was a little bit of shadow boxing, when they're just sort of bobbing and weaving with each other, and it goes in obviously 1-1 at half time. In the second half, it's like both managers give them loads of jelly babies and like a sugar rush and went, right, are you going to be on the front foot and actually go and take the game opposition? And that turned into basketball. And then it was a fantastic goal from Elanga, who put Nottingham Forest 2-1 up. And then they completely lose concentration. And then you got your man, James Ward-Prowse, comes in with a couple of corners and just like whips them in from the left-hand side, the first one, which is a sort of curling right-footed one. And Jarrod Bowen, who's probably, 5'9", 5'10", completely unmarked in the middle of the 6-yard box, makes it 2-2. And I was actually calling for Souček to be dragged off because it wasn't working with Jarrod Bowen up front. And then it's a corner out swinging from the right-hand side, again from James Ward-Prowse. And Souček heads it in to make it 3-2.
He'd also hit the crossbar just before that as well, hadn't he? After being given the ball on the edge of the penalty area, the ball was passed back poorly by Nottingham Forest defender, and he just popped it up over the goalkeeper and he hit the top of the crossbar. It was so close to putting them in front on that junction as well. You think James Ward-Prowse will be sitting by his phone over the next couple of days as Jude Bellingham's shoulder looks as if he's going to be ruled out of the England squad? Levi Colwill didn't play for Chelsea. There was no James Maddison, he's not in the squad either. Callum Wilson looks as if he might have to pull out of the squad too. So with 4 pullouts, James Ward-Prowse, Cole Palmer, will they be waiting by their phones looking for a text message from Gareth saying, "What are you doing this week, guys?"
Yeah, I think James Ward-Prowse has been really unlucky now to be overlooked for 3 successive squads, when you look at the immediate impact that he's made at West Ham.
9 assists and 16 appearances.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You know, and maybe there were people who said, well, if he leaves Southampton, he might not be quite so effective in another team, but he's been really effective for West Ham, and actually he's been the perfect signing because we know that David Moyes puts a lot of stock in set pieces, and his delivery is, I think it's the best in the league. So yeah, I think he's unlucky. Will he get the call? I'm not convinced. I think if Gareth Southgate's got a choice, then maybe Cole Palmer might be the pick. We'll find out in the fullness of time. But that felt like a big win for David Moyes, because I know they had the victory in Europe in midweek, but their recent Premier League form hasn't been good. And if you look at West Ham fans on social media, it doesn't take much for them to start to turn on David Moyes.
Evangelos Marinakis owns Olympiacos and Nottingham Forest. Is he going to send David Moyes a Christmas card?
Yeah, he might try and poach him if he don't, because David Moyes is out of contract, isn't it, at the end of the season. So, but Nottingham Forest, actually, that was probably one of their better away performances.
They're getting better away from home. Because they won at Chelsea, they did well at Manchester United. Should have won at Manchester United.
Well, I think since
did well at Arsenal the first day of the season.
Since the beginning of last season, they've lost 18 games away from home. They've been struggling. I think in 13 they haven't scored, but they were better in general play today. But it's just Steve Cooper, we devastated that they just switched off completely from those 2 corners. But their general play was very, very good.
Well, he was after the game actually. He said, let alone get a draw from it, I think we probably should have walked away with 3
when they're
points.
2-1 up, exactly. And then again they switch off and West Ham go 2-2 within like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the game completely changes.
Okay, they were the big headlines from Sunday. Let's move on to Saturday, where the headlines were made late on at Molineux. Wolverhampton Wanderers staging an epic comeback right at the very end. They spent most of the game huffing and puffing and not really creating that many chances. But the goals that they scored right at the end of the match were nothing short of terrific. And when they were screaming out for a bit of quality, Pablo Sarabia certainly provided it.
Yeah, he did. Brilliant first touch and finish. And obviously then momentum, such a big thing in football. Perry's just alluded to it in the West Ham game. Suddenly Wolves had all the momentum, and you kind of felt they were going to go on and score the winner. Brilliant reaction from Gary O'Neill, almost Mourinho-esque.
It was brilliant.
Down the touchline. Very un-Gary O'Neill-like, but I think, as you said on the Sunday session, maybe that's a result of the frustration with the officiating that's gone against Wolves so far this season, that unbridled joy just came out. But I don't think anybody is surprised that Spurs dropped points. I went for the draw. I think when we recorded the preview pod,
Alex Crook went for the draw.
But when we
cost us how much money did he cost us today?
What was it, 400 quid?
Yeah, we can't talk about it, but yeah, unbelievable.
But when we recorded the preview pod, I think we all felt that with the injuries they had and the suspensions, this could be a problem for Spurs, because Wolves are no mugs. Gary O'Neill is certainly not a mug. And I think it could get worse for Tottenham before it gets better, because they've lost Basuma now, second suspension for him this season, so the midfield has been torn of him and Maddison. Obviously Van der Ven is out for several weeks now. I think it hasn't taken long for Spurs to be a bit Spursy.
Eric Dyer going, you want me to play a high line? Eric Dyer kind of think, no, not for me, thanks.
Well, to be fair, it's his own fault, really. He's had a high line cut into each of the side of his head, hasn't he? He's gone for that sort of new age mullet that he's growing out the back. I'm not sure about that.
Like new hair, would you really know?
He'd be a bit vain, I think.
No,
mullet,
exactly. Yeah.
Would you try and sport one of those?
Oh, I've rocked a mullet. Don't worry about that. Oh yeah.
It's coming back now. Matt Doherty's
Ginger
got
mullet.
one.
Billy Ray Cyrus.
Fran Perez of Valencia's got one on the old grow. They're all going for it. And Dyer is trying it as well. I'm sure it's a bit. It doesn't suit
Dyer
him.
effort.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it is. You could do it.
He don't want to diet either, does he?
Just in case you're wondering what Crookie cost us, we have a charity bet on the Sunday session, and Crook always picks a draw, which is why we now call him Splinters. It's his new nickname. But it was a good game for Wolverhampton Wanderers. I thought for large parts of it, they had loads of the ball, but didn't really create the opportunities. The reason they don't use Sarabia, I think, on a more regular basis, because they're shorn of Neto, and he's usually their big outlet in terms of speed on the breakaway, is because he slows it down a little bit. Whereas they want that speed of Cunha, of Hwang, at this moment in time. The only issue with, and Bellegarde sort of tries to give a little bit of that, but all three of them lack a little bit of end product, which is a bit of a problem for them.
And he's changed it a bit, Gary O'Neill, because he wanted the front three, you mentioned there, with Hwang, Neto and Cunha. Now he's changed it to a front two.
Front two with Bellegarde sort of almost
exactly
number 10,
behind him, and
coming in from the right.
He's a very underrated, we said it before, obviously Wolves have beaten Man City where they were brilliantly structured, drawn with Newcastle. He's got in there with a blank canvas at Wolves and thought, right, how am I going to get these players to play which suits the players that I have, not necessarily with the philosophy that he's going to implement. And I just think he looks at the group of players that he has, what he did at Bournemouth, and I think that's a sign of a really good coach. But also,
you look at the fact that last year they were the lowest scorers in the league. They've only failed to score in one game all season, and that was the game against Manchester United on the opening day when they should have had a hatful anyway. So, I mean, to transform a team that couldn't score into a team that scores in every game now, that's some achievement. And to beat Spurs, to beat Manchester United, to draw with Newcastle, to draw with Aston Villa, that's a terrific start to the season for him, really, isn't it, in comparison to what many people thought that they were going to be up against.
They beat City, not United. Let's not rewrite
history.
History.
They should have beaten
United
Manchester United.
When they beat
They should have beaten Manchester United.
United won
Even better, they beat Manchester City. But they were done out of the Man United
It's
game.
the same players that Lopetegui was effectively saying weren't good enough, you know, and was throwing his toys out the pram. And history's repeating, isn't it? Because he inherited a team at Bournemouth that Scott Parker had pretty much chucked under the bus as being relegation fodder.
He said they weren't good enough, didn't he? Yeah. And with Wolves fans, they weren't really having Gary O'Neill when he first went there. And I think they're
having him now.
They're having, and because there's no danger of them being relegated at all. And if you're a Wolves fan, you think, actually, let's give a good cup run. Let's have a really good FA Cup run. Do you know what I mean? And see if we can get ourselves a trophy. So I think he's won them round. Results, obviously, but as you said there, the style of football.
Yeah, absolutely. Tottenham Hotspur, though, 2 defeats in a week. And they've got big fixtures to come. They play Newcastle. They've got Manchester City upcoming in the next few weeks as well. So it's going to be a big month, I think, without Maddison and without Mickey van der Ven. To go through that Christmas period without them as well is going to be tough. Gary O'Neill obviously has been the subject of quite a lot of attention because he was the one who first verbalised the issues with VAR and the officials. He said he doesn't even speak to Howard Webb anymore. He did actually have a conversation with him last week where he said he had a more sensible conversation. He explained his ideas about how VAR could move forward, and Howard then explained how he thought it was going to work. It was slightly different.
That's going well, isn't it, for Howard at the minute?
It would take it on board. But then we had Arteta coming out and making his big statement last week as everything was a disgrace. You had a few other people I spoke to during the week who were suggesting that there was a lot of managers and players that felt as if the clubs needed to take action. You had the LMA coming out and saying something as well last week. And then today, Roberto De Zerbi exploded in the post-match press conference. Now, it's worth pointing out that his words can be taken a little bit out of context because when you read them in your papers in the morning, it will look a lot more aggressive than it sounded when we heard the press conference. And the reason for that is because what he actually says, the words he actually uses, I'm not entirely sure he means those words, but he's not a native English speaker. His first language is Italian, so it sounds a little bit more aggressive. But he actually said these words: I do not like 80% of the referees in this country. I don't like English referees' behaviour, and I'm unhappy about the way they perform.
Did he clarify what he meant by behaviour? Do you think that the referees think it's more about them than the game, or do you think that
he
they're
didn't
not
go into any
good
further
at communicating?
Detail, no. But overall, if you're saying I don't like 80% of the referees, you're basically saying you're not happy with the way things are going in terms of officials.
You know, in future, if there's going to be a 50-50 decision,
that's what I said on it.
And then that's the way. Referees are human. Do you know what I mean? If you say, like you've heard a man, you say, I don't like what you do and the way you go about it, it's the next 50-50 decision. It's going to go against Brighton. And the refereeing standard this season, obviously before this international break, I think has got worse because of the way that they've been managed by Howard Webb. I think there's too much fear. I think they're actually frightened of making their own decisions. I think their minds are scrambled. I think in the VAR booth back at Stockley Park, their minds are completely scrambled. So Howard Webb was brought in, wasn't he, to oversee everything and make it a lot clearer, and it's got a lot worse. And if De Zerbi was talking about Dahoud's sending off.
No, he said it was a red card.
Oh, good. I was going to say, because that was actually, I'm not going to say he did it where he did. He did it on purpose. He went to hurt Osborne because when you see it and he's on the floor and he's nowhere near the ball and he actually straight-legged stamps on his foot.
This is in Brighton 1, Sheffield United 1.
Yeah, that was the most obvious sending off of the season.
It's a strange time for De Zerbi to articulate it, bearing in mind that he's not really complaining about the big decision of the afternoon. But I do think it's probably a result of the fact that maybe Arteta has galvanised some of the other managers with what he said, particularly the overseas managers, I would suggest. But also, if you go back to last season, the game that you did at Villa earlier this season in
Well,
particular.
if you go
they've been on the
Yeah.
wrong end of some really dubious decisions. So maybe he's just had enough.
They've been most affected by bad decisions. There was a table that was published this week, and they were the bottom.
Yeah.
And he'd have probably
ones.
seen that table.
He would have seen that, and also I think the officials at not necessarily Brighton, but a lot of clubs are trying to keep the lid on their managers and players from coming out and speaking, because they have all got to the point where they are losing their minds over it, because there are decisions that are being made that they can't fathom. So they are getting to the point where they don't trust the officials. And I think instead of just accepting that, and we had this conversation the other week, there was a decision in a game that we all watched back several times. It was in a Brentford game, do you remember? And it was a completely wrong decision. It was the Brentford goal that was chalked off. Remember, they won the game anyway. It didn't matter. It was Christopher Raya was flagged offside, and then he wasn't. It was Nathan Collins. It was in a game. We all looked at it. And because they'd won the game, no one highlighted it. Because there was another few decisions that week, and we'd been talking about it a lot, we stopped talking about it for a weekend. And that was the wrong thing to do, because you've got to keep highlighting these mistakes, and you've got to hold these people to account, because otherwise it's only going to get worse.
Wasn't there an advert was gone out this weekend for VAR officials?
Yeah, Crookie's going to do it.
Yeah, well,
As applied.
actually, with all that, they said, you want to be cool under pressure, good at communication.
Yeah.
The one thing that was on there was that common sense. Because we've been saying for a long time as well that you need the same VAR with the same referee. So you get a trust between both, and you know what each other's looking at. So it's taken, we've been VAR for 4 seasons now? Is this the 4th season?
Yeah, I think it's been something like that.
It's taken this long to think, actually, no, we actually might need teams to make it
Well, they haven't got enough, have they?
No, there's not enough officials, which is why you've had cases where an on-field referee has been in the VAR room 24 hours later, or vice versa.
They are overworked. They do big games Saturday, Sunday,
Yeah.
and psychologically, it's very difficult for you to have that concentration levels. So they are a bit overworked as well, you're right.
Yeah.
Especially if some of them would have done European games in midweek as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's probably a VAR for today. We'll leave it there because...
it wasn't actually that controversial a weekend, maybe apart from the Endo one in the Liverpool game. VAR had a relatively quiet weekend for
Well,
once.
Arteta loved it, apparently, didn't he, Saturday?
He made a point of telling me that.
Well, he said he wanted, if I'm going to slag them off, then I've got to say they've done well when they've done well. You could have no complaints about the Vieira sending off in that game, that's for sure. Let's get to that, because at the Emirates, Arsenal got back to winning ways. Only just got back to winning ways, though, Perry, didn't they? Because it didn't have everything their own way in that game.
No, I must admit, obviously, I was at the Emirates yesterday, and there was a little bit of complacency, I think, not just with the players, but I think with the actual fans as well.
The atmosphere was weird.
Yeah, because it was flat, Crookie, wasn't it? And normally when the North London Forever anthem is played, it's packed and it's rocking in it to the rafter. It was half full, because I think even the fans felt, oh, it's Burnley, they're having like a really bad time, this is going to be a foregone conclusion. And Burnley were very well organised in the first half when they were out. They had a good structure. Vintinho, I thought, was excellent against Martinelli, the Burnley right back. And then they just looked like they was going to get in at half-time 0-0, which would have been like a brilliant result for them. And then again, they just switch off, and the ball comes in from the left, and then Bukayo Saka has a header back across, and Trossard's really brave, and he smashed against the post. Goes in at 1-0, and then everybody's thinking, that's it, it's done and dusted. And Burnley come out in the second half and have a proper go. And then Brownhill gets his goal, deflects off Gabriel. Then there's a jeopardy. Then the atmosphere changed in the Emirates. And then they thought, oh, we've got a game on our hands now. And then Trossard does his James Ward-Prowse impression, doesn't he? And takes a couple of corners, whips them in. Saliba heads it from 2-3 yards, where James Trafford should be better. The young goalkeeper played really well, actually, yesterday for Burnley, apart from the 2 corners. But... yeah, Burnley made them work for it. That was probably Burnley's...
Apart from 2 goals that separated the 2 teams.
But you're looking at Burnley away from home, and they've been far too open and far too easy to play against. In the first half, they weren't. They were a lot better structured. So I think...
They're still going down, though, aren't they?
Oh, they're going down, and they've just gone bottom as well, haven't they?
Yeah.
Today, Sheffield United have gone like second. But Vinks and company keep saying, oh, we've got to learn from these mistakes.
Well, he said yesterday that they had high standards, and he's so proud of the fact that they're so driven, and he was coming out with lots of management sort of platitudes.
Yeah.
However, they're 19th going into today's game. By the time they wake up tomorrow morning, they're bottom of the table. Their next set of fixtures are West Ham, Sheffield United and Wolves. they've got to start putting together some semblance of result. Otherwise, it's all right you sitting there saying, oh, they're going down. But I don't think the Burnley fans are happy to be as accepting of that. They want to see a bit of fight. They want to see some sort of dragging, or attempt at dragging themselves out of this situation.
Yeah, and he was suggesting they did show that fight yesterday, as you mentioned. He talked about how hard they worked and how hard they worked in games last season, which he felt maybe they didn't necessarily get the credit. I mean, you say Arsenal only just won it. I think it was comfortable. You know, the time between Burnley equalising and Arsenal going back in front, it was almost like if you score, we'll go up a couple of gears and we'll beat you quite comfortably. And they did that. So, yeah, I didn't see anything to suggest that Burnley have got a chance of staying in the Premier League. And I think from an Arsenal perspective, it's a victory that gets them closer to Manchester City, obviously, with what happened on Sunday. Still questions over Kai Havertz. Again, he was confident shot.
He was poor yesterday. His first touch, you can tell someone's tense. And his first touch step kept bouncing off him.
Anything else? The Arsenal fans are sitting there with an Alex Crook bingo card waiting for Kai Havertz. Arteta's made the wrong decision over the goalkeepers. And
I can just say,
Ramsdale's a scratch golfer.
Everybody keeps saying to me that Man City haven't hit their straps yet.
Yeah.
Arsenal haven't either.
No.
Arsenal aren't playing anywhere near to the level what they were
Saka
playing
was quiet
last
again.
season.
Apart from that brilliant leap.
Yeah, then he gets his assist. So I think Arsenal have missed Jesus. Martinelli and Saka miss him because he creates mayhem with centre halves and dropping deep and having like different sort of 1v1s. On Burnley's side, they spent £100 million. It's not as if they haven't had a right go on the recruitment side, and they've probably got a lot of players that are too good for the Championship, and they've found the step up to the Premier League difficult. But as mentioned, Vitinho at right back and Koleosho, who played on the left-hand side, when they do go down, there'll be two players.
Yeah, Koleosho is a really good player, but he plays in fits and starts because he's only 19 years of age, and he's young, isn't he? 19, 20. But he's got potential. I think the truth about Burnley is that they've I think when Bayer had got an injury earlier in the season, it unsettled their defence. He's come back in now. I was expecting them to do a little bit better when he did, but that hasn't materialised.
Just Bayer beware then, was it?
Just on Saka, by the way, brilliant leap. And
three good leaps, by the way. Saliba's leap, Zinchenko's leap for his scissor kick, and then obviously Saka one.
And brave from Trossard as well, because there's some players who don't necessarily see that through because they know they're going to hit the post.
You would get out of the way.
But on Saka,
the post might get out of the way, actually.
And it sounded like Gareth Southgate was a little bit unhappy that Reece James has made himself unavailable for these upcoming England games, and that might harm his future chances. I think there's an argument for Bukayo Saka, who I don't think looks fully fit, to say to Gareth, look, we've already qualified. I could probably do with these 2 weeks off. Yeah,
it's not as simple as that with England, because they do need to win their games in order to get better seeding. Otherwise, they could find themselves in the second pot. And if that's the case, it makes the group stage a lot more difficult for them. So although you can say, oh, we've qualified, the job isn't done yet. There's still points to play for.
How many points do they need to guarantee top spot?
Well, it depends on what everybody else gets. But Malta, they'll need to beat, and they'll probably need to beat Macedonia as well. They should beat that.
If Bukayo Saka, they talk about player welfare, and Gareth Southgate is obviously bothered about England. He's not really bothered about going back to your clubs. So worst ways out, he shouldn't be playing against Malta. Right, worst ways out. If he plays against North Macedonia and it's going, then if he's playing, then he should be taking him off after like an hour. He should play an hour.
But Mikel Arteta also has responsibility for managing his minutes, and he doesn't do that.
He did take him off at the weekend.
But in midweek, in midweek he didn't, did he? He waited till the 81st minute or something, and he got kicked halfway through the second half.
He did the same thing against Bournemouth when they were 3-0 up.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's not just Gareth's responsibility to manage his minutes. It's got to be...
No, but actually it's Saka's responsibility as a player to say, I'm a little bit tired.
Don't have a go at Gareth. Did you ever go at Gareth then?
No.
Don't have a go at Gareth.
Oh, no. Yeah, Gareth, Pep.
Go calm yourself.
Stevie Cooper.
Stevie C. Was it Stevie C?
Gaz O'Neill.
Didn't mention Erik Ten Hag though, did you? Manchester United 1, Luton Town 0. And talking of teams that haven't hit their straps yet, Manchester United missed a hatful of chances on their way to victory over over Luton. What are you smiling about?
You're talking about teams not hitting their straps. We're talking about the most informed team in the Premier League, aren't we, officially?
1-4 lost.
Top of the form table.
If any example of statistics not meaning, giving you the full picture was evident, then this is certainly it. The fact is that, yes, over 5 games, they are the informed team in the Premier League in terms of results. But crikey, if anybody's watched those 5 games, they know full well that isn't the case, don't they, Perry?
The thing is, they're grinding out wins, aren't they? To be fair
Fluking,
to them.
grinding out.
Yeah, but
all of those
and
things.
I
Well,
think it takes a little bit of character.
Yeah,
they
but
were
what-
better
do that.
yesterday. They were
Yeah,
better
and
yesterday.
obviously Højlund hasn't scored in the Premier League yet. Obviously, scored in the Champions League, but you can feel sorry for him because he's not having loads of chances being created from. Mind you, he could have got a couple.
He had
couldn't he?
chances on
exactly.
Saturday, yeah.
So, and with Erik Ten Hag, it was his 50th Premier League game, wasn't it? Yesterday?
Correct. You got
and
the
he's,
stat?
And he's won 30. It's the best of any Manchester United manager. So
It's the
obviously,
second fastest in the Premier League ever, isn't it?
to get 30 wins out of
Yeah.
50 games. So he's had so much to deal with we know all this stuff
Yeah.
off the pitch. And we talk about Pochettino with a project. They've got to give Erik Ten Hag his head there because the club's culture, we said about it's rotten from the top all the way through. The recruitment's been pretty poor. He's trying to exact some standards on that side. And as I say, they're just winning, basically, they're winning ugly.
Yeah.
And Man United fans aren't used to that.
No, they're not. But actually, again, match-going Manchester United fans are accepting of that because they know there's issues. There's this takeover. We expect Sir Jim Ratcliffe to take a minority stake during the international break and bring in his own team. I've heard one or two names that I need to back up before I release them publicly of people he wants to get involved.
Bradley Wiggins?
And I think it could be,
No?
I think it could be quite positive for Manchester United. They've had injuries. They've had the Jadon Sancho
Cavendish?
situation. Ericsson and Højlund have both picked up injuries at the weekend. So I do think, because they're Manchester United, Erik Ten Hag is probably the most scrutinised manager in the Premier League. But as we sit here now, we're going into an international break. United are 6th in the table. 5th might be enough to get into the Champions League. He's ahead of De Zerbi, who's had an awful lot of plaudits. I know you'll say, well, he's only in charge of Brighton, but he's being talked about as a possible Manchester City manager. He's ahead of Eddie Howe, who we're all talking about as the next England manager. He's ahead of Mauricio Pochettino, who many of us think is an elite manager. Maybe it's time to cut Erik Ten Hag a little bit of slack.
Yeah, don't get too excited. You've beaten Manchester United have beaten Luton by a goal. They've beaten Sheffield United by a goal. They've beaten Burnley by a goal. They've beaten Wolves by a goal. So, yes, they've got the results on the board.
City and Tottenham didn't beat Wolves by a goal, did they?
No, but City and Tottenham are above Manchester United. Just calm down. Don't get too excited.
I don't think it's a disaster, is what I'm saying.
Who's saying it is a disaster?
A lot of people have.
But he's got away with it, but they haven't played the top fixtures yet, have they? I mean, they've still got to play a lot of big teams away from home.
And in his defence, he hasn't had his first choice back four, has he?
That's-
He's had a few
I
inches
totally
as well.
agree with you. And I've been saying that this is a guy you've got to now just let him get on
Exactly.
with it because you've given him far too much of a free rein. So now you've given him that free rein. You've got to let him have the time with the players that he's selected in order to produce the best performances. But the Manchester United mouthpiece over there wants to spin it as if it's the best story in the world.
By the way, Onana, just to mention dispatches, he pulled off a brilliant save from
He's been
Carlton
much improved
Morris
the last few weeks.
from his header when it was 0-0. That was
Much
like
improved.
world-class.
They haven't employed you yet. Just chill it out just a little bit. Be a little bit more objective. They're doing okay. It's
Oi,
better.
So Jim watches this,
Yes,
by the
Jim.
way. Exactly, yeah.
Just so you know, we do have an idea of some names for people who could come into Old Trafford, and they are good quality people that have done these jobs before. So it will be interesting to see whether or not that materialises over the next week or so.
Can I ride a bike?
This is your.
You'll be on your bike in a minute, I'll tell
This
you.
is your reference to the Sky Cycling Team. Is this what it is, or
Ineos,
as it was eventually
exactly.
called when Dave Brailsford was in charge of that? Should we move on to Bournemouth Newcastle? Bournemouth winning by 2-0. Talking of injuries, and this is what I was saying about Manchester United have had injuries, but everyone's having injuries, and I do worry that this is because of the fact that we had the Winter World Cup last year and the knock-on effect. I'm sending you all messages about it in this morning. Real Madrid have got really bad injuries. Newcastle have had injuries, Chelsea have had injuries, Liverpool had injuries today where they couldn't field a full bench. It's catching up with everyone, isn't it? And Newcastle have been particularly blighted.
Well, they've had the injuries. They've had to do with obviously Champions League, another sort of step up in standard. Where I think the Arsenal game Saturday night took a lot out of them. And obviously then they got Dortmund, then they go to Bournemouth. Bournemouth had their victory before that, didn't they? So they're on the up. And you said, I just thought against Bournemouth they looked leggy. I thought because Newcastle, when they're at their best, they're very athletic, aren't they? Physical side, where they like to close down. They couldn't do it against Bournemouth. And then Dominic Solanke gets his 2 goals, 6 for the season.
Terrific.
Yeah, so he's leading the line really well for Bournemouth. Just takes a bit of pressure off of Iriola, doesn't it?
Well, it does. Actually, going into this weekend, they were 2 points ahead. If you look at the same fixtures this season compared to the results last, they had 2 more points in those fixtures. They've beaten Newcastle now, so the record looks even better. And watching that game, it felt to me, maybe for the first time, that the players are now buying into what Iraola wants to do. It was their Iraola performance, the way they pressed the ball, the way they tried to dominate possession. And to be honest, without Nick Pope, who was excellent, it could have been an even more comfortable victory. So I think Bournemouth definitely are moving in the right direction now.
Yeah, he made 4 or 5 really good saves in the game to keep the score down. And Trippier then was involved in a heated exchange with the fans straight afterwards. We saw the footage on social media. In all fairness, I mean, I think Trippier was right to point out the injuries and how well they've done up until this point. I don't really think that there was many Newcastle fans that were complaining. It's a very long way to travel to go and watch your team not perform. I understand that. But they are stretched to the limit and they're playing a lot of games at this moment in time. And do you know what? It's better than it was 2 years ago.
The thing is, well, with...
Not saying you should be accepting
exactly,
of it.
I don't know what the Newcastle fans have said to Kieran Trippier, but obviously triggered something. He was obviously like emotional afterwards. He's upset because his team's got beat. But the thing that I don't get is he's taking a bit of stick. Fans think they can say what they like, in what tone they like, how aggressive they want, and language they want to use to players. But players are not allowed to come back at them. Because Kieran Trippier wasn't shouting or screaming or, ranting or raving. It was saying, like, have you seen how many injuries we've got? It's not as if we haven't tried, we haven't put anything in. So I think that players are allowed to just to say, like, you can calm yourself down a bit.
Well, listen, I think he made his point, and I think he's probably right. Newcastle have had a terrific start to the season so far, and I think they will end up, by hook or by crook, moving a few things round in January to get a few loans in, even if they're not going to be from Saudi Arabia because the Premier League are going to block that. But they'll get some reinforcements in. Everton did brilliantly. They beat Palace by 3-2 in a thriller. Who would have thought a game between Roy Hodgson and Sean Dyche would end up with 5 goals?
Everybody thought it was going to be 0-0. That was it. That was the banker. But I'd seen Everton at West Ham when they beat West Ham 1-0. And again, Sean Dyche has got his team very well structured, especially away from home. Calvert-Lewin makes a difference because he brings everybody else into the game as well. Decore obviously got his goal, which he plays just off of Calvert-Lewin. And at the back, obviously Tarkowski and Branthwaite, although they conceded 2 goals, but he's got a steady sort of centre-half sort of pair in there. So again, for the turmoil that Everton are going on off the pitch, they're safe. There's no danger of them going down as long as Calvert-Lewin stays fit.
And up the Villa.
Yeah. Brilliant. 13 home wins?
Yeah.
In a row. Record now. Fantastic. And that bet with Jim White, £500 for charity, that Villa finish above Newcastle.
He turned around to me today and I said, it's only November. He just kept saying to me, it's only November, stop getting so excited. And he turned around to me and said, you take the bet then. And I went, no chance, I'm not getting involved in that.
But they've built up this superiority complex at Villa Park where I think there is a real fear factor for opposition teams. They score a lot of goals as well. It's not like they're nicking games 1-0.
And Ollie Watkins misses chances, but he scores chances as well. And he missed a big chance in that game today, but he recovered and scored as well. He's a terrific little finisher and he's got great speed, which causes problems for teams.
His goal epitomised what Unai Emery's told him to do is stay more central. Exactly, right in the middle of the 6-yard box. Yeah. And he's a manager that you won't even complain about playing Thursday, Sunday.
No, he loves it.
He's a Jedi. That's what he does. He loves. I think Aston have got a great chance of winning the Conference League.
Absolutely.
And he'll see that as if you're winning. Players don't get tired when you're winning. When you're winning games, everybody wants to play, and he improves individual players. We look at John McGinn, the way that he's gone on to a different level. We mentioned Ollie Watkins as well. So I think Villa have got a great chance of. You said it, you can finish in the top 5, can't you, for Champions League?
Possibly.
Possibly, yeah. I think they've got a great chance.
Depends on coefficient.
Who'd you fancy for the bet, me or Jim White?
You said Aston Villa would be above, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Not a shadow of a doubt.
It's November. It's not done yet. Don't
Certainly
get too excited.
No,
don't get too excited. He does get a bit excited. He likes to react to... He's got a bit of recency bias, aren't you?
You're as good as your last result.
Yeah. Mind you, knowing you, I thought you'd have gone for a draw. Villa remain
Splinters Crook. Right, thank you very much. Enjoy your international break. I know you like to take those off. You and I will be working obviously as normal next week. We're looking forward to that. We'll be doing some international break podcasts as well for you as England try and take on Malta and North Macedonia. We'll have some Premier League news in there as well. Hold on, are we at November and no one's been sacked yet?
Yeah, and there were 5 managerial departures in the Premier League by this time last season.
You know what that means, don't you? There's one coming. Stay tuned.